Let me guess. You're trying to act unbothered, but you still check your phone hoping she'll text first. That silent hope? She can feel it. And as long as she feels it, she feels safe walking away. You see, women don't regret leaving a man who's still emotionally available on demand. They regret losing a man who upgraded beyond them. Right now, you're focused on getting her back. But the real question is, how do you make her feel the loss? Because regret doesn't come from words. It comes from absence, from growth, from status shifts she didn't expect. If you're ready to stop bleeding value and start rebuilding power, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it, step by step. Let's start by facing the truth about why she left in the first place. 100% of the time, she left because she believed she could do better. I know that sentence stings. It feels unfair. It feels cold. But I need you to hear it without ego, without defensiveness. Women do not leave relationships simply because they are unhappy. They leave when their internal calculation shifts, when the perceived value of staying drops below the perceived possibility of something better. Attraction is not sustained by love alone. It is sustained by perceived value. Somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe you became predictable. Maybe you became too available. Maybe you reacted emotionally instead of responding with composure. Maybe you made her the center of your world instead of remaining centered in your own. When a woman starts feeling that you are easy to access, easy to read, and emotionally dependent on her responses, the psychological dynamic shifts. You stop being a challenge. You stop being a variable. You become a constant. And constants don't create tension. Here's something most men misunderstand. Women are deeply responsive to emotional intensity. The highs, the uncertainty, the feeling of earning your attention. Dopamine doesn't spike from stability alone. It spikes from anticipation, from novelty, from movement. So when the relationship becomes emotionally flat, even if it's comfortable, her brain starts scanning for stimulation elsewhere. Not necessarily another man yet, but another possibility. And when that possibility feels more exciting than staying where she is, the shift happens. Women don't leave when they're miserable. They leave when they think they have leverage. When she believes she can secure a better option, when she feels you won't walk away, when she senses that you need her more than she needs you, that's when the decision solidifies. Now, this is the part where most men collapse into self-pity. I gave her everything. I treated her well. I was loyal. But none of those things automatically preserve attraction. You can be a good man and still lose perceived value. That's not an attack on your character. It's a wake-up call about dynamics. If you stay in victim mode, you'll chase. If you chase, you confirm her advantage. And once she feels secure in her decision, regret becomes impossible. So before we even talk about making her regret losing you, you have to accept this. She didn't leave because you weren't enough emotionally. She left because she believed she could upgrade. And if you want to reverse that belief, everything from this point forward has to shift. Number 1, cut off the supply. And when I say supply, I don't just mean texting her. I mean attention. I mean emotional access. I mean the validation she receives every time you react to her existence. Right now, whether you realize it or not, you are a source of stimulation for her. Even after the breakup, every time you watch her story within seconds, every time you send a just checking in message, every time you respond to her cold, delayed reply with warmth and reassurance, that is supply. And the moment she ended the relationship, she subconsciously expected something from you. A reaction, a protest, an apology, a late-night confession. Something that confirms she still occupies your emotional center. Most men give it to her. They text paragraphs. They ask for closure. They stalk quietly but consistently. They orbit. And every one of those behaviors sends the same message. you still have me. Here is what you need to understand about the female nervous system in this context. When you are constantly present, constantly available, constantly reacting, you become predictable stimulation. There is no withdrawal, no tension, no loss. Dopamine doesn't spike when supply is unlimited. It spikes when access is uncertain. So when you cut off the supply completely, no messages, no likes, no story views, no accidental encounters, you create a sudden absence where constant stimulation used to exist. This is not about manipulation. This is about self-respect. You are not withdrawing to punish her. You are withdrawing to restore balance. Because right now, if she left, and you are still emotionally present, the power dynamic is tilted entirely in her favor. She made a decision. You are reacting to it. Silence shifts that. When you do not respond, when you do not chase, when you do not feed her ego with visible pain, something uncomfortable begins to happen on her side. The certainty she felt starts to lose reinforcement. She expected you to break. You didn't. She expected you to negotiate. You disappeared. And when expectation is violated, curiosity is born. This is why the no contact rule works, not as a trick, but as a psychological reset. But listen carefully. If you cut off contact while internally obsessing, checking her profile from a fake account, asking mutual friends about her every weekend, she will feel the desperation indirectly. Energy leaks. Masculine frame means emotional control, not silent resentment. You don't announce your silence, you embody it. You don't block her dramatically to provoke a reaction. You simply become unavailable. And that shift alone, from reactive to unreachable, is the first crack in her certainty. The more stable you are in your absence, the more unstable her assumptions become. Remember this line: the man who can walk away without noise is the one who regains leverage. This is the foundation. Without this, nothing else works. Now let me explain why that silence unsettles her more than any emotional speech ever could. Human psychology is wired around scarcity. What is constantly available fades into the background. What disappears without warning pulls attention back in. When you were together, she knew your patterns. You replied fast. You initiated often. You reassured consistently. Your presence was stable, predictable, guaranteed. After the breakup, she still expects that pattern to continue in some form. Maybe less intense, maybe less affectionate, but present. Then suddenly, nothing. No reaction to her story, no subtle, "hope you're doing okay," no passive-aggressive quote, no visible emotional leakage. The absence is clean. That's when curiosity begins. The female mind is highly responsive to shifts in emotional access. When the man who once oriented his energy around her becomes unavailable, her brain looks for explanation. And when there is no obvious answer, it creates one. Is he seeing someone? Why is he not reacting? Did he move on that fast? Scarcity creates a psychological gap, and the brain hates gaps. When access is cut off, the memory of you becomes amplified, not because you begged, not because you argued, but because you removed reinforcement. Silence forces her to feel what your presence used to cover. Let me give you a simple scenario. Before the breakup, you would respond to her texts within minutes. After the breakup, she sends something neutral, maybe even slightly cold, expecting a reply that reassures her control over the situation. You don't respond at all. Or you respond days later, calmly, briefly, without emotional hooks. In that moment, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer seeking resolution. You are no longer seeking approval. You are not trying to re-enter. You are detached. And detachment destabilizes expectations. Often, what follows is subtle. She watches your stories more frequently. She appears online at the same times you are. She asks mutual friends about you casually. She might even test the waters with a light message just to measure your temperature. This is not because she suddenly misses you deeply. It's because her certainty has been disrupted. The man she thought would emotionally orbit her is no longer orbiting. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When she left, she expected emotional security from your reaction. She expected you to confirm her value by chasing. When you don't, she must internally renegotiate her assessment of you. You move from the guy who needed me to the guy who can function without me. And that shift alone reintroduces respect. Scarcity doesn't guarantee regret, but it reopens the psychological door that desperation permanently shuts. You are no longer proving her right. You are creating ambiguity. And ambiguity is far more powerful than pleading. Number 2, become exceptional. And I need you to hear this clearly. Not exceptional for her, exceptional for yourself. Because cutting off supply without upgrading your value only creates temporary mystery. Mystery fades, substance doesn't. There are certain things in life you cannot fake. Confidence built from discipline, a body shaped by effort, a mind sharpened by challenge, financial stability earned through consistency. Those things radiate differently. When she left, she believed she could do better. That belief was rooted in comparison, in perceived options, in hierarchy. So, if you want her to question that decision, you don't argue with her logic. You outgrow it. Start with your body. Not because abs magically fix breakups, but because physical discipline changes how you carry yourself. It changes your posture, your tone, your eye contact. When a man trains consistently, he subconsciously communicates structure. And structure is stability. Then your mind. Emotional control is not suppression. It is regulation. If a single text from her can ruin your day, you are not centered. Read. Build skills. Expand your competence. The more grounded you are in your own direction, the less reactive you become to her movements. And yes, your finances matter. Not because women only care about money. That's a shallow interpretation. But because financial growth signals ambition, foresight, and leadership. A man who is building is a man who is moving upward. In every social hierarchy, rarity creates leverage. There are fewer disciplined men than distracted men. Fewer emotionally composed men than reactive ones. Fewer men building than complaining. The higher you climb in that hierarchy, the fewer competitors exist at your level. And here's where the power dynamic quietly shifts. When she starts observing changes, your physique improving, your schedule tightening, your presence becoming more composed, she doesn't just see growth. She sees lost potential. She begins to think, did I walk away too soon? But let me challenge you with something uncomfortable. If you only improve to trigger her regret, you will sabotage yourself the moment she reacts. Because then your growth becomes dependent on her validation. That is weak leverage. True leverage is indifference backed by undeniable progress. You don't post for her. You don't glow up to send a message. You don't perform success. You become it. And when you become it, something changes in how women perceive you. Not just her, but others. Your energy shifts from seeking approval to embodying value. No woman regrets losing a man who never rises. But many women quietly question losing a man who rises beyond what they anticipated. You are no longer the version she evaluated. You are upgraded. And the moment she senses that you are evolving without her influence, the narrative in her mind destabilizes again. Now the man she thought she outgrew appears to be outgrowing her. That is not revenge. That is repositioning. Cutting off supply created absence. Becoming exceptional creates contrast. And contrast is what turns indifference into doubt. Number 3, rinse and replace. But let me slow you down before your ego runs with that phrase. This is not about grabbing the nearest woman to numb the pain. If you try to replace her while you're still emotionally bleeding, you won't trigger regret. You'll broadcast desperation. Heal first. Heal enough that you don't need her to feel whole. Heal enough that the next woman you talk to isn't a distraction, but a choice. Because once you've cut off supply, once you've upgraded your value, something inevitable happens. You gain options, and options change everything. There is a psychological phenomenon called pre-selection. Women are naturally attentive to how other women respond to a man. Not because they are insecure, but because social proof reduces risk. If other women find you desirable, it signals hidden value. So when she sees you genuinely engaging with someone else, not performing, not forcing it, but living, her internal narrative shifts again. If other women see value in him, maybe I misjudged him. That thought alone can destabilize certainty. But here's where most men make a mistake. They flaunt. They post strategically. They try to provoke jealousy. Jealousy triggered intentionally feels cheap. Confidence displayed naturally feels powerful. There is a difference between trying to make her react and simply existing at a higher level. When you are emotionally detached and socially desired, something subtle but profound happens. She realizes you are no longer a guaranteed fallback option. You are scarce, you are improving, and now you are wanted. That combination creates internal friction. It doesn't always manifest as dramatic messages or immediate reconciliation. Sometimes it shows up as quiet observation, increased curiosity, soft re-entry attempts, a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" But understand this clearly. You are not doing this to win her back. You are doing this to change your position in the hierarchy of choice. When she left, she believed she had the upper hand. She believed she could upgrade. When she sees you upgraded, emotionally stable, physically sharper, socially validated, the comparison flips. Now she must ask herself whether she walked away from a man who was still rising. Rinse and replace doesn't mean discard her with bitterness. It means you cleanse yourself of attachment, and you replace stagnation with forward motion. If she feels regret, it will not be because you begged. It will be because she sees that losing you had consequences. And those consequences are not your pain. They are your evolution. There's one final shift that matters more than all the tactics combined. Power reversal. At some point, if you execute everything correctly, she will notice. Maybe subtly, maybe silently, but she will notice. The silence, the growth, the fact that you didn't collapse. And here is the truth most men are not prepared for. She may come back. Not always dramatically. Sometimes softly. A casual message, a random check-in, a memory resurfaced, a harmless question that opens a door. And in that moment, the dynamic is completely different. Because now, you are not the man chasing reassurance. You are the man evaluating options. If she comes back, the ball is in your court. You don't jump. You don't over-celebrate. You don't reward her for testing the waters. You assess. Has she grown? Has she changed? Is she adding value now, or just revisiting comfort? And if she doesn't come back, you still win. Because the true objective was never to force her regret. It was to rebuild your foundation so solid that her decision no longer defines your worth. Unshakable self-confidence is not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It is calm. It is grounded. It is internally validated. When you reach that state, something powerful happens. You no longer care whether she regrets losing you. And paradoxically, that is often when regret becomes real. The moment she feels your absence without your desperation, the balance shifts. She cannot feed on your reactions. She cannot reassure herself through your pursuit. She cannot confirm her superiority through your emotional dependency. All she can do is observe. And what she observes is a man who did not break. A man who redirected pain into growth. A man who walked away with dignity. That is the ultimate reversal. Not because she suffers, but because you stopped needing her to validate your value. Let's bring this back to clarity. You don't make a woman regret losing you by arguing. You don't do it by begging. You don't do it by proving how deeply you can feel. You do it in 3 precise moves. Cut off the supply. Become exceptional. Rinse and replace. That's it. This is not a game. It's not manipulation. It's psychological leverage grounded in human behavior. When you remove emotional access, you disrupt certainty. When you elevate your value, you shift comparison. When you gain options, you change position. But the real victory isn't her regret. It's your transformation. You cannot control whether she reconsiders. You cannot control whether she reaches out. You cannot control her perception in the short term. What you can control is who you become after the loss. And when you become stronger, sharper, calmer, and more self-contained, something powerful happens. You stop chasing validation. You stop negotiating for attention. You stop collapsing when someone walks away. The greatest revenge is emotional indifference backed by undeniable growth. If this shifted your perspective, subscribe. This channel is for men who want to understand female psychology without being controlled by it. Comment below. Which step are you currently on? And share this with a man who's still stuck refreshing her profile at 2 a.m. Pain can either shrink you or refine you. Choose refinement.